So let's talk about some specific exam causes and effects. And right now what I'm talking about specifically relates to the TOEFL and the IELTS exam and some of the things that increase your anxiety and the impact of that increase of anxiety. So in terms of listening, causes of increased anxiety on the listening exam: when you encounter unfamiliar words or phrases, unfamiliar accents, having to listen and write simultaneously. That's something that happens on the TOEFL and on the IELTS exam. Pressure to complete within the time limit, lack of specific question strategy or lack of specific skills. All of these increase your anxiety level. When I talk about lack of specific skills, whether you're talking about the TOEFL exam or the IELTS exam, there's a requirement on the listening section to be able to understand paraphrasing, right? To understand synonym language. And so if you're able to do that, then you have less anxiety. But when you can't do that, it increases your anxiety. The effects, of course, are poor time management, getting behind, insufficient information, or incomplete or inaccurate answers. So these causes related to listening increase anxiety, and these are the effects. So, of course, what you want to do to reduce anxiety on listening is to work on these areas. What a lot of students don't understand is that doing well on these exams is about skills. It's a skills test. It's not an intelligence test. It's a skills test. I've taught several students who are not that smart, but they get better scores on students. They get better scores than students who are very, very hardworking or very, very bright. And very often is because that student may not be as swift or clever or clear, but they have the skills. So it's not an intelligence test, it's a skills test. And too many students don't work on their skills. In terms of reading, of course, when you lack vocabulary, it increases your anxiety. When you lack discipline, it increases your anxiety. Now, when I talk about lack of discipline, what I'm talking about in terms of reading is overreading. Overreading or not sticking to your technique. And that's the same for the IELTS or the TOEFL exam. The exact same thing. A lack of discipline increases so much anxiety for you all. I tell people on the TOEFL exam, hey, this is the strategy. You find this keyword sentence. Once you find this keyword sentence, you read your sentence. You only read the next sentence if it has a certain level of connecting language. If it doesn't, your answer is in the keyword sentence. They know that. But then they have a lack of discipline. So what do? They read the whole paragraph. Right? They end up wasting time because of that anxiety, that lack of discipline. Same thing on the IELTS exam. I teach technique. I teach strategy. I can't give you the discipline to follow it. Time pressure, of course, increases anxiety. Lacking strategy. Needing to reread. Whenever you're having to reread sentences over and over and over again, that increases your anxiety. And then being unfamiliar with the test. So what are the effects of these causes that increase anxiety? You end up picking wrong answers, picking exact language answers, guessing wrong, wasting time. Those are the effects. In terms of writing, again, the clock running, not having accurate exam simulation. I talked about that earlier. Not having a plan or following a plan increases anxiety. Fake ignorance. unfamiliar questions, wanting to be right. All these things you can resolve before the exam. All of these you can resolve before the exam. But when you don't resolve it, when you don't take care of business before you take the exam, and these things happen to you, right? This is what's increasing your anxiety during the writing. The effect is horrible. You have increased grammar and lexical mistakes, wasted time, poor organization, not giving the examiner what they want, not doing what increases your score, because you've allowed these things to put you in an anxiety zone that you don't want to be in. I told you, once you cross the Goldilocks zone of anxiety, and these are the types of things that push you over, that push you out of the zone, then you have this effect. So much of not doing well on the exam is cause and effect related to anxiety. And then you have anxiety causes that result from speaking. Time pressure. Now, this is more TOEFL specific, the time pressure one, because on the IELTS speaking, there's no time pressure. The IELTS speaking, your anxiety, I don't have this on here, so I'll just verbally say it. For the IELTS exam, your speaking anxiety doesn't necessarily come from a clock like on the TOEFL. What it comes from is being in front of somebody very often, being in front of a person. For some people, that can cause them anxiety. And again, there are ways to get around that sometimes, or ways to prepare for that. A lack of confidence increased anxiety. That you have to think and speak at the same, think and speak, that increases anxiety. Fear of mistakes. Once you're in the speaking section, whatever grammar you know is what you know. So when the test begins, don't have fear of grammar mistakes. Whatever you know, so you go with it. But if you're thinking about your grammar, you're increasing your anxiety and you're not going to do well. Or if you have unfamiliar questions or unfamiliar vocabulary, this affects your fluency, increases your hesitation, you make more mistakes, you have short answers. All right, there are a couple of questions I want to address now before I move to the next section. All right, so Manuel, I'm going to talk about, in the next section, I'll be talking about solutions. And so hopefully I'll address your question then. Infinix Hot 9, that's a strange name. Infinix Hot 9, what I'm going to talk about in the next section will address what your question is. Goggin Deep, ask me your vocabulary question in the Udemy course. I'm not going to address that right now. Yeah. And also, Nor, your question is valid, Nor, but ask me that question in the Udemy course, and I'll happily answer it then, okay? All right, let's keep going.